Really?
Chatty House. We ballin', boy. We going up at the Chatty House. We talk about it all, bring the family out. Sub to the channel, hit the likes now. And we only going up when the lights down. Yeah, we just getting started. Ain't no party like a Chatty House party. We just getting started. Ain't no party like a Chatty House party.
What's up? It's the Chatty House After Party. Look what we got here. It's nothing but trouble tonight. Nothing but trouble. But before we do all the introduction, I do have a little short video to play. Oh.
Short.
Oh, no. Damn shame what happened to Rocky.
Horrible.
Are we supposed to play End of the Road right now by Boyz II Men?
We could have.
Out, man.
We've asked that you just sing a solo.
Oof, that would be, I leave that to you, James. You're the karaoke man. I was singing. What was the song, David, we were talking about from Supernatural?
Carry On, My Wayward Son.
Carry On, My Wayward Son. There you
All
go.
right.
R.I.P.
Kansas,
Well,
right?
Yep.
Kansas, yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Ham's still in trivia mode.
I am still in trivia mode. What's going on?
We got the great James Ham from the Insiders, the Kings Beat podcast, Happy Hour. Been around for James. How long have you been doing covering the Kings now?
This is my 15th season. My 15th season. I broke into the league in 2010 with DeMarcus Cousins and Hassan Whiteside rookie year, and the lowest payroll ever.
I have to ask because obviously I'm not from Sacramento, right? So everything I learned for the most part, especially media-wise and all that, has been since I moved here 11 years ago. So I'm not obviously not as familiar with as everybody else would be with the media, everyone that's been in the media. What were you doing before that? Like, how did you get your start?
Okay, so my start is kind of weird. So I met my wife a very long time ago. When I met my wife, I worked at Albertsons, a local grocery store. And my wife is very smart. She went to UC Berkeley, and we moved to Berkeley together. And then she didn't like Berkeley, so she moved to Davis, transferred to Davis, and we moved to Sacramento. And that summer we got married. And so I worked at Copeland Sports. I started in Berkeley. And I know everyone remembers Copeland's with their 2 for 50s and like all that stuff. But I started in Berkeley, worked Hilltop. I worked Emeryville, helped out in San Francisco, and then transferred up to Sacramento years ago. So when my wife, she went to Davis and then graduated from Davis and then went to Davis Law. When she got done with law school, I went back to school full time, and I graduated in, I want to say 2008. And by that point, we already had 2 sons. And I stayed at home and I started blogging and hanging out. And next thing you know, I had people coming to me and asking if I would like to take on an ESPN website, which was Cowbell Kingdom. And so I started Cowbell Kingdom. And then Zach Harper and I split the site the first year. He moved to Minnesota to go see about a girl. Which is typical for Zach Harper. He's moved all over to go see about a different girl and a different one after that, which is fine. That's Zach in a nutshell. But I ran Cowbell Kingdom with John Santiago for 5 years. And during that time, I was also the stringer for NBA.com. So I wrote game books and pregame blogs for NBA.com. And then in 2015, I sold Cowbell Kingdom to Leo Bias and joined NBC Sports. So I worked for NBC for 6 years. And then coming out of the pandemic, they decided as a corporation to shift all of their local RSNs underneath the umbrella of their local television station. So as opposed to KCRA, because we're in Sacramento, it got shifted under the NBC affiliate in San Francisco, and they no longer wanted to cover the Kings full time, which made sense because I was a luxury and everyone was broke coming out of the pandemic anyways. And so I've been at ESPN 1320, I want to say 3 years. The first year was like as the backup to D'Lo and Casey, and then also like my 3-day a week show, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 3 to 4. And then the last year and a half has been with the Insiders. So, and then I also have the Kings Beat, which is my own personal writing source and podcast with Sean Cunningham and Brendan Nunes.
What I think is so cool too is, especially with both you and Kyle, is the way you guys were doing segments. And I think, and us in the Chatty House, who loved you guys from the get-go, I would say 90% of us.
Yeah.
But is we would.
Rory didn't like me, but unfortunately, he went the way of Rocky the Squirrel.
That's true. Thankfully, it wasn't KC that took him out, though, because that would have been a whole nother Dexter-ish thing. So
no, and I think that didn't come across as crass. I didn't. No. I liked Rory as a person. He was always like very, very opinionated on Vivek and on the salary cap and stuff like that. And sometimes he was right, and sometimes he was way off base. Like the 3 months that he yelled and screamed that I was wrong, that there was no way Domantas Sabonis could have his contract renegotiated and extended. So,
but what I love too is that the fact that after all those, you guys being on so much, we would be literally all of us would say it at some points, like, you guys need to give them a show. You need to get, and we didn't necessarily know at the time it would be both of you together, but every time both of you guys were on, we all were like, y'all need to bring them on, man. You guys need to find some way to put them on ESPN 1320. And then you guys got together, and I think everybody here would agree the chemistry is magnificent. It's, it's from day one, I think it's like, oh yeah, this is it right here. So it's you guys. Jesse to me is up next. I love the way Jesse is like quick on everything, and he's very quick on opinions and all that. And he does a great job when he fills in. So hopefully at some point there will be a spot for him somewhere on his own show too. But I like this, like everybody's gotten a chance to do something and it's helped them grow, whether it's career-wise or personally or whatever it is. So I think that's awesome, man. So kudos to you, man. Kudos.
Yeah, like I came out to one of the live shows, right, at Sky River, and I had never met Kyle in person. And Kyle and I have talked about this a little bit. We didn't know each other at all. Like, really, we didn't. And we had worked together at NBC, but we never worked on the same. Well, even if we worked on the same stuff, he didn't ever approach me. And I was like someone who would drop into the studio, spend like 5 or 6 hours there, and then leave. And to be honest with you, it's overwhelming. Like, I don't want to say I have like face blindness, but if I don't see a name tag and can't put your name and face together, like, it's really hard to remember, because when you're at an arena and there are so many ushers and so many people, locker room attendants, everything else that like know you and know who you are, and then you have, but like without attaching a name to them, it's really difficult. But then you go to NBC and no one wears name tags and you have no idea who anybody is at all. That's really difficult, because I would like drop into their workspace and then like we would do the King show and then I would leave. Like a lot of times I was there with Doug. Anyway, so Kyle was there with me, and the way he tells it, he was going to approach me one day and introduce himself, and I went off on a tirade about Lonzo Ball, like being a surefire Hall of Famer, like in the draft. And he said that my directness with the conversation I was having with somebody, like, made him shy away and like, oh no, I'm not going to go up and approach him. And so Kyle never like actually said hello to me until we were at Sky River, and he bought me a beer. And then someone else bought me a beer, and then I had to go pee in the middle of the show. So I love Kyle. I like the chemistry we have and stuff together. Like I think at the end of the day, we're both people who like a good vibe and a good environment to work in. And so we mesh really well. We have very differing opinions on a lot of things, but there are also so many things that we're very, very close, and like, so we turn those into really strong discussion points. And so I think a lot of people are always looking for, like me and Aaron Brewski, when we had a podcast forever, we clashed on a lot of things, and Aaron was very opinionated, and that's okay to have that. But I also think there are nuanced discussions that you can have, and I think that's where Kyle and I live. We live in a world where we inform as much as possible, and we keep it super professional. We have a good time, but we're also like, we just kind of chill and vibe and hang out and talk sports for 2 hours.
Hey, James, quick question. When kind of going back to your coverage of the Kings, when you broke into, the Sacramento media market, Sacramento's not really, known as being a tough, I guess media market, whatever. But was it tough breaking into that group of like reporters and things that covered the Kings, or were they like very welcoming, or, and who was maybe somebody that might have mentored you, during that process?
Okay, so 2010 is a really interesting time for sports media. It's when ESPN True Hoop is like a monster, right? And what it is it's like they just gave websites to people all over the globe, and you got to choose your own adventure. Like all of us were all over the place. I'll tell you this: like I had emailed media relations and said, "Hey, this is who I am. This is the work I've been doing. I would love it if I could make it to media day." And they didn't get back to me. So I sent another email and they didn't get back to me. I finally got through on a third email. Someone responded and said, "Hey, we've been reading what you're doing and you can come in, but you're going to be on a very short leash. Like, don't learn the ropes while you're here." And I showed up to that first media day. And to be honest with you, it was a really strange media day because number one, the Kings were totally broke. So the players they were bringing in were not high end. If you remember the 2010 season, like Luther Head was on that team, Donald Jackson. They traded for Jermaine Taylor late in the year. We had Antoine Wright, who got a DUI mid-season and then argued that he shouldn't have got a DUI because he had driven up, left his car running with the door open, ran into a gas station bathroom and peed and came out and was hammered, and the cops were waiting for him, and then got a DUI right then. And he kept saying, "Well, I wasn't driving when they caught me," to whatever. So there was no one else who was driving the car, bro. So like we had like a rough crew. So anyway, I had sent in an email again and again. I show up at media day and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to jump in. I've interviewed people a million times. I've hired and fired a ton of people in my life, like when I was in retail management. And I just felt like, number one, these were all like young dudes, and like you could sit there and ask them whatever you wanted as long as you're a professional and were thinking, actually asking them good questions. And I emailed the media relations and said, "Hey, can I come to training camp the next day?" And they didn't get back to me. And then they got back to me late that day and said, "Sorry, we missed it. You can come tomorrow. That's fine." So I started going to training camp, and it was kind of like Wesley on with the Dread Pirate Roberts. It was like, "Hey, I'll probably kill you in the morning." Right. So every day I didn't know if I was going to be let back in. And then all of a sudden I had like a credential waiting for me for the first preseason game. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got in they let me in. And then they let me in again. And then media relations came to me and told me that Paul Westphal, the head coach of the Kings at the time, had whatever it was, I had struck a chord with him, and that he really liked me and he wanted me in the building, and he wanted them to credential me for as many games as they could. And that first season, I was credentialed for all 41 games and preseason. And I've been credentialed every day since. And so I always like RIP Paul Westfall. He was a good man. We would go out to lunch. We would have basketball discussions that were incredible. And he would tell me stories that are just like outlandish and true. And it was a lot. I got led in the door a lot because number one, I've always been someone who's inquisitive and wants to, like, I'm listening and asking questions that I think matter. And he saw that and wanted me there. And so I'm like, okay, this is fine. So I ended up, like, that's how I sort of got in the door. And it was a lot of like being persistent, but also a lot of laying back and being, I don't know, like you have to be like in 2010, you had to be like your own cameraman, your own videographer, your own podcasting, system, your own beat writer, your own columnist. You had to do it all yourself because that was kind of like the world that was being created. And so your question was I accepted? And the answer is like, not really, especially like Aileen didn't really like know what I was and why I was there and didn't really like that I was there. And there were others that were kind of that way. But I will tell you that the late, great Marty McNeil, one of my first days, I had started a website before called the Purple Panjandrum, which is a whole nother story. But Marty McNeil walked up and I shook his hand. I'm like, Marty, it's nice to meet you. I'm James Ham. He goes, I know who the fuck you are. What the hell is a goddamn Purple Panjandrum, motherfucker? And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm part of the team here. And that's where I kind of like, you look around the room and there's Gary Gerald and there's Jerry Reynolds. And then I would say if there was anyone who was at least a part of the media to like pull me aside and have like conversations with me, it was Sam Amick. And we're not that far apart in age. And to be honest with you, I think I'm like a year or two older than Sam. And we also have boys. We both have boys, and that's it. We have 2 boys each. And his boys are maybe a year or 2 younger than my 2 boys. And so we had a lot of common connections. And one of the things that that he called me out on early on was about being the media police, because I had written a piece about, I think it was about DeMarcus, and there were so many angles, but Mark Stein had written something and Aileen had written something, and the 2 stories contradicted each other. And I had written a piece about how, how when you're in the media business, you start to learn that everyone has a source, and whatever that source is usually has some sort of reason why they're giving you something. And that can be for a myriad of reasons why someone's giving you something. And Sam pulled me aside and said, hey, look, you're media now. You're not media police. And like, so that's the one thing he taught me early on, is that it didn't matter how many times Aileen had some story that you disagreed with, or that you were there and didn't make sense, or someone else might have a story that you didn't agree with. That's their own thing. And you just live in your own world and you ignore whatever other people are saying. And I think that was a good piece of advice. But really, that's the biggest one. And then making friends with Gary Gerald and Jerry Reynolds both was like something that happened early on. And it's something that, like, for people who have never met them, they're 2 of the nicest men of all time. And they're both like dear friends. And I think it's something that they made me feel comfortable and made me feel welcome. And as legends, that was really, really cool. I know, like, one of my first games, I sat down at a table, and next thing I know, Jerry and Gary St. Jean sat down, who was there for a Warriors game. And I was just part of their conversation. And a lot of other young reporters around me were like, how did you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just sat here and had dinner and talked to people. And that's kind of where I like think I had a little bit of a leg up, is that I just felt comfortable in my own skin and was able to walk in and talk to people. So that's a really long answer, but there it is.
That's a good one. All I heard was, Manny, keep emailing Sacramento Kings. That's what I heard, man.
I can't tell you, like, what it is, right? You got to do what you got to do to try to get in the door. And And again,
Absolutely.
I've missed 3 games ever, like at home. I've missed 3 home games in 15 years. One, I was at the Board of Governors meeting when they're deciding the fate of the Kings in New York City. One, I was at the MIT. I was at MIT for the Sloan Analytics Conference. And I think 2 years ago, I went to the Final Four in New Orleans, again, scouting, watching prospects. And those are the only 3 games I've ever missed at home.
So you've seen a lot of losing basketball then.
I was 240 games under 500 through 12 years.
Oh, man.
Damn.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Hey, James, you've met a lot of people over the years. Is there anyone in particular that you were just starstruck when you first got introduced to them?
That's a great question. I will tell you, my first year, like whatever the reason, I don't know, like either you're comfortable or you're not. Like I walked in and I felt really, really comfortable around everybody. But in my first year, I was standing on the court in pregame with Sean and with Jason Ross and a couple of other people, and I can't remember who they were. But Dominique walked over, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's Dominique!" Like, and Dominique walks over, "Hey, what's going on, guys?" And just like hung out in our circle, and I was like, "Okay, this is wild." Like Dominique Wilkins is literally standing next to me. Outside of that, like the Kings, I've never felt that way. Like I've never, even like DeMarcus when he was young, super disrespectful, and like he could be snarky and like he didn't want to talk to media at certain times, and I like sometimes I took that as a challenge to be snarky back at him, which maybe wasn't the best idea, but to be honest with you, it was fine. Like we had a pretty good relationship. And then I remember my first year, I was sitting baseline talking to Paul Westphal after the media scrum and pregame, and Marv Albert and Jim Gray walked up. And next thing you know, I'm in the middle of a conversation sitting on the floor of Arco Arena with Marv Albert and Jim Gray, and we're just literally talking about basketball and life and hanging out. And I was like, okay, this is totally surreal. But outside of that, you know, like the job is cool, and I've got to meet just about everyone you could possibly imagine over the course of my career, whether it's like interviewing Hakeem or like Alonzo Mourning or Bob Lanier when he was alive. Like it just like you get to meet random people all the time and talk to them, you know, LeBron, Kobe, like whoever you could possibly imagine. I was in the visiting locker room for years doing work with NBA.com. And so I was always in the winning locker room, which was very seldom the Sacramento Kings locker room. And then I've also I covered all the way when I was at NBC. As soon as the King season was over, I would take the first round off, but I would cover the Warriors all the way through the playoff series every year. So I was in the winning locker room twice after Game 7. Once with the Cavs winning the championship in Oakland, and one with the Warriors winning the championship in Oakland, and I was in Toronto for the NBA Finals when like Kevin Durant popped his Achilles.
Wow.
So.
James, you mentioned, you know, a guy like Gary Gerald, and I always wondered, you know, we love him here. You know, we love what he does. We think he's, you know, one of the best. How is he thought of amongst, you know, NBA media and NBA broadcasters? Like, what do other people kind of like? What is their opinion of the guy? And like, what, you know, how is he amongst his peers like thought of?
I think just with reverence, like it's a little bit like what I talked about with my record. I don't even want to know what Gary Gerald's record is as a guy who's called games. I don't like, I mean, there were, you know, we talked about it the other day. There was a year and a little over where the Kings lost 42 consecutive road games. Like that's just like a guy that will show up every day and give you everything and be honest and tell like the most vivid stories and like paint a picture while you're listening to the game. You know, when I was young, I worked at Big A's Drive-In in Grass Valley. So I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but it's an old A&W. And I would turn on the games late at night and I would clean the grill and listen to Gary Gerald and, you know, moving left to right on your dial. Like he just painted a picture the entire time. And I think the beautiful thing is he hasn't lost any of that. And, you know, it's tough. It's tough to keep up with what's happening. It's tough because the radio world has really been disrespected by the NBA. And it's almost like, who is it in Office Space, right? The guy they just keep moving backwards, and then they move him to the basement. Is it Warren? Is that his name? Yeah. Anyway, you stole my stapler, right? That's what it's been like for Gary. They just keep moving him further back, or some places he's in the second deck. Some places, even at Golden One, he's in the top of the first deck, like what we are with our media seats. Milton, there we go. Thank you, Milton. I would like a piece of cake. Anyway,
Some salt
Gary,
on my margarita.
exactly. Gary used to be front row, and there's so many things you learn and you see and you take away. You hear the little conversations. I remember my first 3 years. Not my first year, but the second, third, and fourth year, I sat on the court across from the visitors bench at Arco. There was 3 tables set up right there. And because I worked for NBA.com as well as, Cowbell Kingdom, I sat there with Aileen like every single game. And like you hear guys like all of the mess that they're talking to each other the whole time. And I think it takes away some of the flavor that you have as a broadcaster. So I feel bad for Gary because they've done that. But like, he's a legend and like one of the honest to goodness, nicest men. If he curses, something has gone horribly wrong. And not like me, I curse like a sailor, but with Gary specifically, something's gone horribly wrong. And, like he's 84 and he just keeps going. And it's like one of the most magical things that you can possibly imagine. And I think it keeps him strong and keeps him alive and keeps him going. And that's good. Like, I hope he calls games until, if he called another 40 years of Kings basketball, I would be okay with it.
Absolutely.
Hey, James, going back to you and Kyle, and you were mentioning how you guys really didn't know each other before you started working together on the Insiders, which is Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon here on ESPN 1320. But how is that like? A lot of people think that you can just hop onto a podcast and just talk to people and have a host and you guys are just automatically okay. How was that working with Kyle, and how long into the game did you guys start to really mesh and have that synergy?
I think like the first 2 weeks, we were trying to figure out like who's going to lead and who's going to do all that stuff. Who's going to like take us into breaks, who's going to take us out of breaks and all that stuff. And, like, to be honest with you, I've been on radio shows hundreds of times. I've been on television hits, whether it's, local or whether it was with NBC. I've done that a ton of times, but there's a whole different realm when you're hosting a show. And I'll say, like, when I work TV and, he can, like, he's a little bit of a touchy subject here, but Jim Kozamore was like the best setup dude you could ever imagine. Like, when he asked you a question, he just led you right into what you wanted to talk about every single time in like a perfect way. And so I think when you're trying to develop chemistry and stuff and trying to build out a show, sometimes you're looking for that. And I think one of the interesting things about what I do now, where it's like the Kings beat, I'm one person. When I'm on with D'Lo and Casey, I'm a different person. And when I'm on the Insiders, I'm a different person. Like, the information can be somewhat similar, but the way that we attack things are totally different. So again, it took a little bit of time for us to just learn each other. But I think within like a week or two, we were like flowing, and like we never had a moment where we were like at each other's necks or anything else. We've never had a moment like that. And I think the cool thing is we do a lot of prep. Sometimes we do the prep together. Sometimes I do the rundown. Sometimes he does a rundown. When I've got a late game, he'll take over. When he's got a late 49ers game on a Sunday night or a Monday night, I'll step in and start, building things out for the show. But our rundowns are usually like 3 pages long. Like, we're prepared for what we're going to talk about. Even on days when there's not a lot to talk about. And I'm not used to like radio shtick and like having all of these little, things built in, like mad props. Like, I would not have thought up mad props because that's not what I'm not a radio guy who has done this for years and years like Kyle has. And so I think we have a good mixture of what we do. But again, I'm different with the insiders. When I'm on the Kings Beat podcast, I'm like leading the discussion. When I'm on the insiders, I'm more like going back and forth. And when I'm on with D-Lo and KC, it's like ask me a question and the long form answers. And so again, I'm talking about Kings the whole time for the most part, but I'm wearing different hats and like trying to give information in a different way in all of those different spaces.
The many styles of James Ham.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. Katrina, you're a little bit quiet up there.
No,
I just want to put this out there. NBA guru Zach, whatever your NBA guruing right there, you're wrong. You're not gonna be the next co-host with me. Just you can mark your words all you want. I don't care. Whatever. Good dude, but no.
That's Kyle's burner.
That's right. It's not because I met NBA Zach guru Zach. He was at the studio one day. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm here for Ham stories. I love hearing all your stories and just about the Kings. I love it. I'm
You've
curious.
done the happy hour before, right? Have you been at a happy hour when I like one of the Kings Beat happy hours?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Who is the best athlete that you've seen that didn't turn professional in their respective sport?
James, like me.
That's interesting. I mean, that's tough because, I have covered some football. I have covered some baseball, for NBC. Like I've covered A's games. I've covered, Raiders games and 49ers games. But I haven't covered a lot of like high school stuff or college stuff. And, we're not a big college town. And so I again, I went to UC Davis and even I didn't make it to the playoff games. I think I would be more like, if I were going to answer that question, to like kind of morph it into what my career path has been. The athletes that I thought would be good that didn't make it in the NBA that I've covered is like there's quite a few where you're like, man, even like right now, Scal Labissiere is doing good work at the G League level and Stockton Kings. Scal has such a pretty jump shot and such a nice human being, like really one of the best young dudes you're ever going to meet. And I thought that he would have made it where he didn't. And, it's kind of a bummer because he didn't. I'm trying to think of guys like that, like Jimmer. Like you could see the vision of Jimmer, but as soon as he stepped on the court, there were too many things that were like major red flags. Thomas Robinson, same thing. Like one of the first times we saw Thomas Robinson in a practice, he did like a full court behind the back, ran down and laid it up through traffic. And it was like, oh my gosh, look at him. And then that was pretty much the highlight of his career. Like was in a practice that nobody saw except for media. So I think there have been more players that have come into the league that you thought might have a chance to be really good that didn't. And, again, guys like Harry Giles, who just his body just would never, ever cooperate and hold up. But I think that's the best I can come up with.
Just so you know, the only correct answer was Kenny Caraway, but that's fine.
I haven't watched enough Kenny Caraway. I have not watched enough Kenny Caraway. I do know he's a bucket. Yeah. So
he's a bucket.
One guy was kind of, as Kings fans, we always kind of wonder about or think what could have been. And James, you were around this team and you're around the management and administration, all that stuff. Do you think when Tyreek Evans, when they were pushing that 25-5, season, do you think that kind of ruined him as a player? Because I always thought that he wasn't going to be this Steph type scorer. I thought they should have been telling him, hey, go more towards like a Jason Kidd type than being this scorer and LeBron, and this Kobe type. I just do you think that kind of messed with his career, like pushing him that season, or do you think it didn't have no effect at all? I just kind of wondered.
No, I don't think that had a lot of effect. I think the dysfunctionality of the franchise at that time Because you got to know, like his second season, we get halfway through that year, and that's when the first relocation attempt starts to happen. That's when the Anaheim deal, again, we knew early in the season something was going wrong. And then we got to like All-Star weekend, and that's when things like really hit the fan. And, it became like this crazy mad rush to try to save the Kings. That's one of I think that hurt him. And then I think after that, as soon as that happened, like the lockout happened, so early in his career, I think he lost his way a couple of times. And to be honest with you, he was a very nice kid. He relied heavily on his brothers to help him with like daily life. He's one of the like 2 or 3 players that during my time in Sacramento has been abused by like the hanger-ons who have like really like taken advantage, and he didn't know how to say no. But I always thought he was a nice kid. I thought him and DeMarcus Cousins were not a good match at all. And then, let's be honest, the Kings missed time after time. What would Tyreke Evans have looked like as a shooting guard next to Damian Lillard instead of Thomas Robinson? What would he have looked like with Klay Thompson as his shooting guard instead of Jimmer Fredette? Like, there are all of these misses, and you want to say, oh my gosh, that's such a miss for the franchise. But at the same time, they're misses for individual players too. What would DeMarcus look like with elite players all around him as a young player? And maybe it would have worked out the same way. But it's the guys that the 60th pick in the draft and Isaiah Thomas that ends up being one of the best players he ever played with. Rudy Gay, who, again, a really good player, but you're always waiting for like the next shoe to drop in that era of Kings basketball with DeMarcus. And with the relocation attempts, again, like my first season, the Kings, like the salary cap, you had to get to 58 million, I believe. And the Kings, I think they traded for Marquise Daniels, who had fallen and broken a bone in his neck and was never going to play again. The year before, they traded for Larry Hughes with the Kevin Martin trade in order to get to the salary floor. I think the next year they traded for Sam Cassell, who was never going to play, to get to the salary floor. And those were so they didn't get penalized by the league. The Jason Terry thing where he shows up and then gets waived. Like that was just to get to the salary floor. So those teams were not only rough, but I think like my first year, and this goes back to the bigger question with Tyreke. Like my first year, I can name, I think 7 players that weren't in the league within a year. No longer in the league. So Darnell Jackson, Jermaine Taylor, Hassan Whiteside was out of the league and then came back later. Dante Green, Antoine Wright never played again. Luther Head never played again. Like there's so many players that just weren't really NBA players anymore, or at all. And that's what made it really tough in those first years for Tyreke to like try to build something and not have just the weight of the world on him all the time, which is what he did.
That's funny you said that too, because for me personally, I've always thought like, except for like the exceptional LeBron, all the like star players, it was always to me about where people got drafted, right? Like I grew up around these 3 guys that played at Proviso East in Chicago. It was Michael Finley, Donnie Boyce, and Sherrell Ford. And Finley ended up being the best out of the 3 as far as longevity and career. But Sherrell Ford had gotten drafted by the Seattle Supersonics when they already had I think at that time they had already 13, 14 guaranteed contracts. So he was already under the 8 ball as soon as he got drafted late in the first round. And to me, he was a superior talent compared to Michael Finley at the time. He just never got a chance. Back then there wasn't the CBA and the G League and all. Like I think the CBA, they might have had the CBA back then. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it was like he basically never really got a cut footing, never could catch on anywhere. And to me, it was all about where he got drafted. They couldn't hone in on what his skill set was. It didn't do anything for them. Why they drafted him, I don't know. But Michael Finley obviously had a great career, a long career, and did some nice things. But it's always been to me like, where are you going, and does your skill set fit what they're running there, and can they help develop you into your your best potential of who you are. Like, not necessarily just because you have skills. Like, everybody that gets drafted has skills. There's a reason why they got drafted, right? It's just what can that team take that and make you the best version of yourself? So
and it's really tough. I think like, even if we look at like the modern Kings, like the today Kings, right? When they went out and drafted Keegan Murray, they made a very conscious effort to make sure that Keegan Murray was really the only young player. And then Keon Ellis, they stumble into him in year 2. But again, it was like, we're going to focus. Keegan Murray's development is the focus. We're going to have a really good team around him, but we're going to bring one player along. I think like there are very few teams that have it all work out, like what Oklahoma City's doing right now. And, you know, Sam Presti's done it before, but again, like before he had like 3 Hall of Famers that he drafted, like boom, 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 with Westbrook and Durant and Harden all at the top end of the draft. You know, all of them are top 5 picks. We're seeing kind of the same thing right now with Houston, where Houston has done an amazing job of mixing the old with the new and really finding players to play hard, having a really strong voice in Emi Udoka and all that stuff. But for me, where the Kings have lost their way so many times and where young players lose their way is when they find themselves in a bad situation. And, you know, like the 2016 draft, the Kings draft, Papagiannis, number 13, Malachi Richardson, number 22, and Scal, number 28. And then during that season, they traded DeMarcus for Buddy Hield, who was the 6th pick in that draft. Then the next year, they draft De'Aaron, number 5. They draft Justin Jackson, number 15. They draft Harry Giles, number 20, and Frank Mason, number like 32 or 33. And then they bring Bogdan Bogdanovic over. That's 9 dudes that are first and second year players that don't know how to play the game at all. And that's just like, it's just a recipe for disaster. And I feel bad for each of those players. The only one who really survived any of that is De'Aaron Fox. And so many teams do this. And it's not like the Kings didn't do it before. You know, like the same exact thing happened in 1991, where they draft Lionel Simmons, number 7. Travis Mays, 14. Dwayne Coswell, number 19, and Anthony Bonner, like number 22. Like, it's really, really difficult to have that many young players who don't know what they're doing and bring them along and think that you're going to have success. And so I think a lot of young players, it is just a crapshoot where you land. And some players will go to a really good team. They'll never get off the bench and never get an opportunity. Like, I know Drew Down, I don't know if he's here, but like Drew Down can always, bring up the Kuminga thing. Like Kuminga, you could say he came to the Warriors at the right time, but realistically probably came to the Warriors at the wrong time. And it's going to be really difficult for him to hit like all these steps in his career. And Moses Moody, it doesn't matter what he does, how well he plays, he doesn't get to play. And so you're always like, young players are really difficult, and coaches who are specifically coaching for their lives, they're usually so incredibly caught up in like, how do I win games? And I don't care about development. They can get development playing on the side, and going to practice and summer league and working out in the summer with the training staff and stuff. But most coaches are, again, like I said it today on one of the shows, like Jerry Reynolds has always said, like, if you have a 5-year plan, you don't have a plan at all in the NBA if you're GM. And the same goes with coaches. Coaches have like a 2 or 3 year window where if you're not very successful, you're not going to be there. And so while the young player question about like finding the right fit, it really means everything for everybody involved. The wrong the wrong GM chooses Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic, and instead of Dave Yeager still being the head coach of the Sacramento Kings, he's an assistant on Doc Rivers' staff with the Milwaukee Bucks. And that had nothing to do with Dave. It had everything to do with somebody else making a decision. You want me to answer that one?
Sure.
I love Jason Jones.
Yeah, go
like
ahead.
Jason and I, the question Spencer asked, what was it like to work with Jason Jones? Jason is a very, very good dude, and he's a very bright guy. He went to Berkeley. He'll make sure you went to Berkeley, but he's a very bright guy. But like, we've had good times over the years, like really, really good times. We didn't always get along, but that happens. Like I remember when I was young, me and him got in like a screaming match in the media room, and like from across the room, we never really got like in each other's face or anything. But always happy-go-lucky, always always there, always showed up, which is something that I appreciate, because that's something that I've like when it comes to Brendan or when it comes to other young like reporters, like you got to show up every day that you can. And it's a real bummer right now because Kings keep having practice at 12:15, and I can't get there from the studio in time. And it's a waste of my time to drive a half hour down to the stadium and show up, and they've already done media. And then now I have an hour drive back up the hill. So I appreciated Jason for always showing up. Jason was able to build relationships with players and always had a strong vibe of the team. And I think that was a really good aspect of him too. And, to be honest with you, I miss Jason. I miss having him around. He was fun.
So go ahead.
Well, two questions, James. One, what is your favorite cereal? So Johnny G can stop asking in the chat.
That's not me, James.
Like we've already.
It's not me.
Come on,
Johnny
man.
G is asking everybody in the chat. So I just want to get it out there so we can get that over and done with.
It's Crunch Berries. It's Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries.
Okay.
He's
And
got the Captain Crunch shirt and everything.
Yeah, I do.
okay. So my actual question was, over the years, you've seen a lot of really bad teams. But has there ever been one team that coming in you thought was going to be, gangbusters, just do really good and just really failed more than you thought they were going to?
Yeah, it's the last year of Dave Yeager. No. I'm the first year of Dave Yeager. My bad. First year Dave Yeager, DeMarcus Cousins, Rudy Gay, Darren Collison. What do you think? Kosta Koufis, Ty Lawson, Omri Caspi, Matt Barnes. I could keep going. There's more. Oh, Aaron Aflalo. Mm-hmm. They loaded up that year, and like the idea was right, but nothing worked out. And part of that was just a little bit of a rebellion. Part of it was you were giving DeMarcus Cousins and his group one last try. And so they loaded up with veterans. I thought that would be a good team, and it wasn't very quickly. And you knew it wasn't going to be very good, like relatively soon. And then, tragedy struck. We had the Rudy Gay popped his Achilles, and it was like a very quick snowball from there. And it ended up not being like, of all the years I've covered the team, like Malachi was on that team. It ended up not being a super fun year. Because overall, I don't think not a lot of people were pulling the same way. And that was probably, talent wise, it's the only team that compares to like this 3-year run that I've covered without any question. You had the 1 year with Isaiah and DeMarcus and Rudy, but they couldn't stay healthy at all. And it ended up like Ray McCallum played so many minutes at the point guard position as a rookie, 2nd-round pick that year. And Ben McLemore just wasn't developing and all that stuff. But the 1 year was that year. And not only it's the year that they traded DeMarcus at the deadline. They waived Matt Barnes at the deadline. They traded Omri Caspi at the deadline. And even like foreshadowing to that season, because I'm pretty sure that's the year that Ty Lawson was there. And Ty started having, like, he missed a team plane in Kentucky, like early on. Then we had the New York situation where DeMarcus and Matt Barnes got into it with like a couple at a New York City nightclub, whatever that happened. So there was a bunch of things building up to the trade of DeMarcus, and then that whole entire thing like blowing up. But I will tell you that like during the build up to that season, Dave Yeager told me, I said, man, you got a lot of young players this year, because they had drafted Papagiannis and Malachi and Scalabiciere that year. And he goes, yeah, just wait till next year. And I'm like, huh? Yeah, just wait till next year. This will look a lot different.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. And then next year they had, the 5 rookies we talked about. and like they blew it
That's
up
crazy.
like out of nowhere. Even well, the Malachi year, the year before, they had signed Bellinelli and Costa Kufas and those guys, and that year didn't work out either. But very specifically, that one season, I thought it was going to work out. And then the other is when they fired Michael Malone and unceremoniously. That's what, 2014, I want to say, because Vivek took over in 2013. They hired Malone, and then he lasted like 24 games into the next season. And that's when DeMarcus got viral meningitis and missed 10 games, and they went from like 9-5 to 11-13 over a stretch, and then fired Michael.
Speaking of, go ahead, Manny.
Well, I was gonna say, just transitioning a little bit, like, and saying that with everything that went on those years, and here we go, fast forward, and we are where we are right now with this current team. And you see what Fox had the interview with Draymond, and then Mike came out today and had his little kind of say into it. So how do you feel right now, like in seeing things, like, is it overblown? Is there something to be concerned about? How do you see the way things have played out the last couple of days?
Well, I mean, in all honesty, Fox is on a little bit of a media, like he's done media outside of Sacramento over the last couple of, like, I don't know, the last week, right? We've seen other clips from him. Draymond is going to try to get you to talk like raw basketball. And to be honest with you, that's kind of what I expect from a conversation. And I don't think that like anything Fox has said is wrong at all. And I agree with Fox that, like, if you're going to sign a deal and you're going to be in Sacramento for, because again, if he gets a Supermax, he can sign for up to like 5 years and have him in Sacramento for another 6. And that's a long time. That means you're like, he'll be what, 27 tomorrow? What is today? 2 days. 2 days. He turns 27. So that's like realistically is 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. It's all of his prime. If he's going to be in Sacramento, he needs to know that they're on a winning path. And I think when you bring in a 35-year-old as your big swing for the fence move, that better work out, because that dude ain't getting any younger, and you kind of know where it's heading. So, I mean, I'm okay. But like, again, they need to build. I've been very, very like noisy and adamant about this. That like, you just can't walk into a season where you cannot match up at all against the Denver Nuggets. You just can't. I don't care if Keegan Murray was there or not last night. You don't have the length and athleticism to match up against that team. And it's something that has plagued this team for the better part of like 3 or 4 years. And whatever their version is to like getting defensive minded 3-and-D, 3s and 4s, wings, I don't get. And it's just not what any other team in the league is doing. So I get where he's coming from when it comes to like, look, I want to make sure that if my name is going to go down as De'Aaron Fox, Sacramento Kings, that I have an opportunity to win, because the only way to be all NBA, the only way to get in the Hall of Fame and make all-star teams and all that stuff is to win. And so far he's not been able to win. And the 1 season or 2 seasons now that he has won, like, you didn't build off of it. And so you're hitting this point where you're a little bit, looking around at your legacy as a player and not knowing where to go. And I understand it. I've been around a ton of players with talent who don't know that this is a spot that they need to stay in, or, even like DeMarcus thought this was a spot that he was going to stay in forever and was 100% bought in. He just wouldn't do the things that you needed to do to win or to be a good teammate and stuff like that. So when it came down to when I saw Mike Brown's reaction too today, I agree with Mike as well. Like, it's fine to say that this is where I want to be and who I want to be as a player, and this is, you want to win X, Y, and Z. But at the same time, like, anyone can see that, like, there isn't a foot on the gas from the opening tip of every single game from your star player. And there are games where he's absolutely phenomenal, and those games just show you like who he can be. and who he should be. And then there are other games where you're left like, okay, I don't know where he was. And so I get it, because Mike has a job of bringing an entire like 17 player group along, or 18 players, whatever it is now. He's got to bring that group along together, and he needs to make sure that he's keeping them together, but also that they're being real with each other the whole time. And you can be as real as you want with Draymond Green on a podcast, but the response that Mike can have is to be as real as he can be as well in front of media, and make sure that, like, yeah, I get it, you want to win, but let's be part of winning. Then let's do this together. And I get both sides of the coin. I don't think the Kings are in a horrible spot because of this, because I know Mike and De'Aaron have a very good relationship both on and off the court. But I get why as a coach you've got to say something. And even I got why Paul Westphal years ago blew up DeMarcus Cousins with a long form like written piece, and then he was fired a day later. I got it. Like, it happens sometimes.
That was I think one of the things that the Kings were counting on, and you just brought, I mean, since we're talking about this current squad, I think they're really counting on the development of Keegan and him to turn into the player that they hope he's going to be. And James, you've seen a lot of prospects come through Sacramento. You've seen a lot of players. At this point in time, I know he's still young. Do you think, in your opinion, that Keegan is going to be that guy they think he is, like a multiple-time All-Star, or is he more of a, I hate to say it, but like more of a Harrison Barnes type guy where he's going to be paid well, he's going to be in the league a long time, but maybe he's that 14, 15 points a game scorer? What do you think about him so far and his development?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, there's no shame in being a Harrison Barnes player in the league.
Right.
Like, I know we're all clamoring right now. Like, everybody's like, oh, go get Cam Johnson. Like, I hate to tell it people, but there's no difference between Cam Johnson as a player and Harrison Barnes as a player. Like, they're in the same tier. They're guys who are good players who have never made an all-star team and who won't make an all-star team and who bring a lot to the table, but also, they aren't like franchise changers, right? And I think you're still hoping that Keegan can find that level. And I know, like, the Kings have been so high on him behind the scenes for the last couple of years. But you know what I mean? At a certain point, he has to take this step. And in all honesty, I don't think the Kings really helped him. Like, DeMar DeRozan is a very good player, but if you're looking to bring along Keegan Murray and make him a third option, DeMar DeRozan wasn't the guy to bring in to make him a third option. He's a guy that will instantly make Keegan a fourth option. And then when you had to press a nuclear button and put Malik Monk in the starting lineup, I mean, like, there's no way around it. Keegan Murray is now your fifth option. And so you just kind of keep pushing him down in the pecking order. And that's because, like, you got to win. That's that at the end of the day, you're trying, if you're a GM and you're just sitting there and you strike out with a couple other trades or players that you thought you might get, and DeMar DeRozan's sitting there on the table and you can go get him, you got to do it, right? You can't just walk out of an offseason talking about all these players that you might get and then get none of them and end up with nothing. And so I get why the Kings did the DeMar DeRozan deal. I also thought that Keegan Murray could still be part of what they're doing, especially on the offensive end. But, we're at kind of a crossroads where he's not performing well. Like, just to be honest, like, he's been rebounding great and playing great defense, but the fact that he's still shooting, 30% or lower from the 3-point line and not really being able to find a rhythm is a problem. And, I think he still brings value to the team, but I also, like, I'm recalculating who he is as an extension player this offseason. And I'm more to the point where, is he a $20 million player? Is he a $25 million player? He's not like a $30 or $34 million player. I think it's pretty clear at this point. But you still have to, like, you're playing within the parameters of the NBA where they're agents and they're, players that you got to work with here. And salary caps and everything else. So it's complicated. I still think that Keegan can be a very, very good player. I'm just reevaluating whether I think he can be like a 20-7 guy that plays great defense. And I think I even said it today. Like, I think we're looking more like the hope was he would be Chris Middleton. And at this point, you're hoping maybe Tobias Harris, but more realistically, a Cam Johnson or a Harrison Barnes type player. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. They're just different valued players to your franchise and different valued players when it comes to salary cap.
I just want to just let the chat know that we can confirm that Ham watches the Chatty House After Party, because he's now mentioned that Keegan Murray's been the fifth pick or the fifth option on team, which we talked about in one of our first few episodes. He's also mentioned that Keegan Murray is like has a pathway of being Harrison Barnes, which again we talked about here on this show. So Ham watches us, you guys. Just let you guys know that Ham watches us.
Either that or the Chatty House watches the King's Beat podcast and listens to the insiders, and then talks about that on the after party.
It goes hand in hand. There's no reason to point fingers at anybody.
Symbiotic relationship.
Chicken or egg.
That's right. It's like venom. It's like venom. It's a symbiotic relationship.
That's right. That's right.
My real question was: we're now 27 games into the season. Kings are 13-14. We all know that they're not succeeding the way we thought they would be. But where do you grade the DeRozan experiment at this point? Do you think it still needs more time? Do you think we can say it's good for the team? Like, where do you rank it so far?
It's so hard to like wrap your brain around the DeRozan situation, because look, as a scorer, he's been tremendous. Like overall, his stats, there are games where you have no chance if DeMar DeRozan doesn't step up. You know, how many games have we seen where he goes off in the third quarter for 18 points, or he has a big fourth quarter. I still think we're in a mode where you're trying to figure out the best way to optimize everybody. And again, the Kings hit it's like a poison pill, right? They had no choice but to go to Malik Monk. And when you did that, it just messes everything up. It does. And I feel for Mike, because everyone wants to see offense and everyone wants to see that. That's great and all. But the Kings just lost to the Denver Nuggets because they allowed them to score, go 7-7 from the field and 4-4 from the free throw line in the last 4 minutes of the game. That's why they lost. They scored 129 points. You should win 90% of games that you score 129 points. And DeMar DeRozan's part of this, where he is a very offensive player and a very distinct offensive player. And I like what he brings to the table. And I don't blame him for a loss. That, fumbling a ball, that happens. And I would even, I said it today on the air, if he would have dunked that ball, Denver would have had 2.8 seconds left. What in the world would make you believe that the Kings were going to stop the Nuggets on the last play of the game?
Nothing.
They hadn't done it for the last 4 minutes. So what would make you think that they were going to do anything other than give up a back-breaking, game-winning basket at the end of the game?
You shouldn't be in that position.
Well, no, of course. You shouldn't have been down 41-21 in the first quarter either. But the flip side is Denver should have never given up 47 points in the second quarter. So I get all of this, but look, I think DeMar is a good player. I'm slightly concerned about his impact on the development of Keegan Murray and what's happened here. I don't, again, Keegan has to do a better job of just flat out hitting shots. But that goes for almost every single one of the Kings shooters. They just haven't shot the ball well at all this year. But I don't know how we evaluate it. The one thing I do know is that when Kings fans get all up in arms about the national media saying, hey, you guys won 48 games last year because you didn't have any injuries. And then the next year you have injuries in the last 3 weeks of the season and you only win 46 games because of the injuries. You have to understand that there is some of the things that are going on with the national media, that they do watch certain things and they are right about certain things, even if it feels like they're piling on all the time. I think the national story was this isn't going to work because the Kings are just going to be an offensive team and not play defense. And that's going to be a problem. And DeMar's going to score his points, but will that equate to winning? man, the team is 13-14. Like, I don't want to say the national media hit it like perfectly, but I also don't want to say, hey, those guys are idiots, because the Kings are 12th in the Western Conference.
That kind of goes into, everybody's been talking about, trade scenarios and trying to improve the team, try to add length, trying to add, depth on that bench. And I guess my question is, when trying to improve the roster, Ham, do you, with the Kings' current assets, with, trying to trade Lyles and Herter and picks, do you think they could achieve that? Because in my opinion, I think the only way they could add the depth that they needed is if, they trade maybe one of their pieces that they don't want to trade. I mean, how do we improve the team with scraps?
Yeah,
wouldn't it be easier to do that? And I don't want to trade Keegan. I don't want to trade anybody that we are core 5 players. But isn't that the way to add depth?
it takes something to get something, and like I think we can all like equate this to like you have a house on your block, and every 6 months they decide to put it up for sale, and they put it for the same price they did before, and it doesn't sell. And it's still sitting there and still owned by the same people. And they've still owned it for like the last 8 years, but they put it on the market every year, every 2 years. And they're always asking high market. Like the Kings are offering the same exact thing that they were offering during the offseason. Like literally. This is the same exact package of stuff that they were offering before. And so if it hasn't worked to this point, and you had deals fall through on draft night, you had deals, that you thought you might be able to close out like in the first couple of hours of free agency that didn't work out. And then you end up going to the DeMar DeRozan thing because you'd worked that deal out. Like, I'm just not sure what makes them think that they're going to find something different. And, maybe they've got to be more creative. Maybe they do have to give up something that, that they don't want to give up. Like, again, if you're dealing with the Nets and you've been trying to get this deal done for like 2 weeks, like 2 weeks ago, I heard that they were having conversations with the Nets, right? Like at what point does Jordi Fernandez dip in and say, hey, like, I'm okay if you guys make a deal, just get me Keon Ellis. And every Kings fan goes, oh my gosh, you can't give up Keon. It's like, you have to give up something to get something. That's the game. Like if you don't have a bunch of first round picks, if you don't have a bunch of, they have no second round picks. Like the deal they just, the Nets just pulled off for Dennis Schroeder. Like the Warriors gave up 3 second-round picks and they got one back. So basically the equivalent to 2 second-round picks. The Kings don't have access to their 25, 26, 27, 28, or 30. Maybe it's 31 first, second-round picks. So they can't even like make that move. And so you are in a tough spot. And maybe Kevin Herter, like I thought Kevin Herter probably helped his value for a couple of days, but then he had another shoulder injury. And Trey Lyles, again, is an expiring contract, but this is a second calf injury he's had. And you're sitting there like, okay, like, am I just trading for salary at this point? Or is there something else you can get out of the Kings? And if I'm the Kings, flipping it around, I'm looking at my 2027 draft pick and saying, am I really going to trade my 2027 draft pick for upgrades, but moderate upgrades, when DeMar DeRozan might not be there and when De'Aaron Fox might not be there? And so you start looking at like what that draft pick could look like. And I know Damian and Kenny love to laugh about the 2031 pick swap, but I guarantee you this, Victor Wembanyama is going to be a badass MFer in 2031, and the Kings might not be very good, and they might have the ability to swap the 28th pick in the draft for the first pick in the draft. It's already done.
That's crazy.
So look, like it's all like a complicated puzzle that that's why I try to be fair to everybody, and you've got to look at it from every side. There is no like just going and fleecing a team and giving up nothing and taking back all their good players and you give them all the players that you don't want. That's not the way the league works.
It works all the time on the trade machine. What are you talking about, James?
I know it does. It does. Especially if you use the other one, not the ESPN one, the other one, like the fan Expo or whatever it is. Like it gives you all kinds of like everything's a thumbs up. But yeah,
If only.
I mean, that's the thing is like everybody always thinks that they can. It's always funny reading through the chat. Like we all joke, but like the ones that are really serious, they think they're like the perfect trade there. Or why don't you just do this? Like you just do. I dream of Genie.
yeah.
And then there it is. There it is, man. Trade is done, man. Like that's how simple it is. You just wiggle your nose and that's it.
Well, they never ask why would the other team do that.
Well, I know, like the
It's
one
like,
with
'cause they
the one with the Miami Heat today that people are throwing out there. It's like
Bam.
Rozier and Jaime Jaquez and I don't know a couple other dudes that don't move any needle at all, and a 2030 first round pick. It's like, why would the Kings possibly do that? Like, if they're going to trade De'Aaron Fox, they're going to get a gold mine for him. They're going to get a lot for him. And whatever Miami has, like whatever their fans are coming up with, like that's not legitimate at all. And I think the one thing that we try to stay in is reality world here. Like we're not, when Kyle and I talk about trades, we're not talking about like, okay, like how do you get LeBron James? Like we did not, we blew that discussion away. Like we're not going to have that. Like, come on, let's not waste. That's not happening, right? But it's also like, how do you get Donovan Mitchell? How do you get Jason Tatum? Like we're not going out there and creating these types of deals because they don't realistically exist. Just like that Miami Heat trade doesn't realistically exist. You know, the Kings have more to go get Bam Adebayo than the Heat have to go get De'Aaron Fox. Just straight up. Like you want to give up Keegan Murray and Kevin Huerter and some, you know, like match salary and then give them 3 first-round picks for Bam Adebayo. That's a whole hell of a lot better than anything that Miami can offer for De'Aaron Fox. And that's just, it's just a reality. You know what I'm saying? And so that's where I like to, like when we're having conversations about trades and stuff like that, I like to stay in a reality world where not only does it have to work financially, but like it has to work like logically. We can't just like expect even the Washington Wizards to accept just all of the bad players that you have or the players that aren't working out at all. And it's like, they're like, man, we're 3-27, but what do you want us to be like 1-40 the rest of the season? Like, okay, like that doesn't seem like fun. Like we're playing for Cooper Flag, but like we got to sell hot dogs mid-season, and you know you have to live in some sort of reality.
Well, they're trying to build their teams too. You know, what are they just going to give up? You know, their assets for nothing.
And sometimes they will. Like it doesn't hurt to ask. But like the trade machine monsters that we've created out here with people like putting stuff out there, it's just like it's really, really difficult.
And I also saw on Twitter like when people were talking about the whole Fox and the Mike thing going back and forth and people's opinions on it. It's like, to be honest with you, no matter how you feel about how right Fox is or how right Mike is and what he says, like at the end of the day, when all this comes down to it at the end of the season, and if this team falls flat on his face, Fox holds all the cards at some point where he could just say what he wants, especially with somebody like with his agent, right? Rich Paul, like we know how they play the game. So at the end of the day, if Duke comes out at the end of the day, like you can, even at the end of the season, you got all these fans, let's just say turn on fire. It's your fault. You didn't play up to that whole mega star. Bro, it doesn't matter. Like if he wants to go, he's going to go. It's a players league at this point. So none of that even matters at this point. Like we just got to play better. We got to be better. Everybody's got to be better from 1 to 12. Everybody's got to be better, including the coaching staff, Monty. Like it's all hands on deck is the way I see it at this point.
No, I totally get that. And I also like, we've talked about this on the air, just the flat out house of cards that the Kings are playing with here. Like if, you know, Mike gets fired and De'Aaron doesn't like that, what is the impact there? Does De'Aaron stick around? And let's just say they do something crazy like fire Mike right now, right? Or Like if they go, let's say they lose the next 3 games and they've lost 4 in a row, and here they are like way under, and they hit like the nitro button on this thing and just blow it all up. Well, like when has it ever worked out to replace a coach mid-season? And if you get to the end of the season and it didn't work out, and that was like the only button that your general manager had to push, like he's done. And then like who wants to sign an extension with a team that just fired another head coach and fired a GM, and like who's even going to negotiate the deal? And here you are starting over again if you're De'Aaron Fox, and he's going to be looking around like, yeah, I'm good. I had enough.
Yeah.
So like it's a very, very clear like slippery slope here. Like fans want one thing, but do you really want like to know what it all looks like when something bad happens? And maybe some fans do. I get that, but at the same time, like I've been through this too many times. I've been like,
That's the track record, right, James? Like this isn't like, not that it's just apples and oranges, but it's one thing for the Lakers to fall on their face and they do certain things. Like they've been winning for most of their. Obviously, they've had down years, but like for the most part, they've won. And then you look at with Fox being in Sacramento, like and what he's already gone through in the first couple of years of his career. He's not going through that again. He is absolutely not going through that again. He'll be out the door.
Sabonis from Sean Cunningham. Sabonis is listed as questionable for tomorrow.
No, I have
they were
not
saying
looked.
That earlier today. Yeah.
That's not surprising at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
The way he hit the ground, I would be surprised if he plays. And I haven't looked at the injury report. I've been busy all day. Like once I left our show, I had the D-Lo in case he hit, and then trivia, and then I'm hanging out with you good folks.
Oh, and LeBron James is questionable tomorrow also.
No, look at that. Well, yeah, he doesn't play all the time anymore at 40, whatever he is. So Kevin Huerter is questionable. Keegan Murray is questionable with left ankle soreness, and Domantas Sabonis is definitely questionable with a back contusion. Not good stuff. Yeah.
Man.
Well, I'm questionable because I think that's the answer. I'm just not going to go to any more games. Every game
who's not?
Who told you not to go?
Me. Zebra PT told me to stay my ass home. It's like every time you go to a game, they lose. So
I'll tell you who's not questionable. I will be there. I will be there. But like at the same time, it's like, look, this team lacks depth, and like you don't know what they're going to respond, how they're going to respond to a game like this. And to be honest with you, the Lakers aren't very good either. They're going through some of the same exact pains the Kings are, and they're a team that is virtually the same as it was last year, except for Dalton Connect. And like very, very similar team. They did not make any moves, and of course they swapped out their head coach. It's tough because I would like to tell you that there's a solution here for the Kings.
We
but
just talked about this.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, James, with Wes and with Monty, what, in your opinion, and I'm sure you talked about this before, but I don't remember Wes and Monty and Mike, how's that relationship? Like, because I feel like there are some arguments sometimes of they didn't really provide Mike all his type of players, whether you want to believe that or not. But how well do they get along? Like, not get along, but what is their relationship like? Sorry.
Well, I mean, like, look, I think that their relationship is solid, but I think there's always going to be some, like, look, if you're a chef and somebody gives you, like, you want to make a specific meal, and then they don't give you like 4 ingredients that go to that meal, you're going to look at the restaurant owner and say, hey, like, I can't make that. And they're going to say, well, that's fine. Go make something different then. And that's where Mike has to be adaptable. But it's also where, like, your front office has to be logical and has to, like, we're not talking about like mystical, you got to go out and get, a $30 million 5-star player here. It's very basic. I mean, like, teams around the league went out and got players like Derrick Jones Jr., like Najee Marshall, like, like whether teams are drafting them like Herb Jones or whatever. like these players have been available and the Kings have not been able to get them. And I think that that's where like you've got to be on the same page. But even like you get to the conversation, like what if one person in the front office or coaching staff wants one player and one player like on the Nets, like so somebody wants Cam Johnson, somebody wants Dorian Finney-Smith. Like you got to come to some sort of agreement, and then on top of that, you have to understand that if all you can afford is Dorian Finney-Smith, then that's one thing. If you don't want to give up draft picks and get Cam Johnson, that's another thing. Like there's all of this give and take that has to happen. But I would also say, like, look, if you want to improve as a defensive team, Dorian Finney-Smith makes a lot of sense. If you want to improve as an offensive team, and that's what we hear from Monty all the time is about offense, then Cam Johnson's a better offensive player. And so you have to play, like, I hope that they can all get on the same page about what makes sense. But at the same time, like, do they have the assets to go get anything? And so I think the relationship is solid. But I also know, like, everyone's got a boss. And, and for Mike Brown, it isn't just like the front office is one layer. Then on top of that, you've got ownership, which is a whole nother layer and something else you have to like figure out and how you play on the same playground and be nice. And so, hopefully they all figure it out and they're able to improve the team.
I hope that Carter, I hate putting pressure on Carter, and it's unfortunate that everybody like is so clamored to watch him play because they need somebody to come in. And obviously that doesn't require draft picks or doing anything. It's just basically him getting healthy and seeing if it can contribute in some way, if he even comes back this year. Like, I'm not even sure that's really on the table as much as they like to show video of him.
I think he'll be back, just so you know. I'm pretty sure we're going to see him make an appearance in the G League relatively soon. And then we'll have to see. But that doesn't mean anything because like just because he goes and gets some G League play. I don't know if anyone saw the other night Isaac Jones went for 31 and 15 at the G League level. And then the next night he played with the Kings, and I don't know that he had 2 points. It's one of those things where, like, just because you go down and get some G League burn, like Devin Carter hasn't had a training camp. He hasn't had a summer. He didn't play summer league. He didn't play anything. And so I don't know what to expect from him either. But I also don't want to discount the fact that he was a 12th pick in the draft and an older college player who was very well defined as a college player. And some of the things that he does on a basketball court just makes sense for the Kings. I mean, you got a really, really good rebounding guard. And again, I don't know if he can be a difference maker right away, but he's another asset that you have. And, whether it's to trade or whether it's to fill in off the bench because you had to put Malik Monk into the starting lineup, whatever it is, you do have an asset there that maybe improves your team. You hope that he can be a top 8 or 9 of the rotation guy in year one. But that's a lot to ask for a player who hasn't played in like 6 months.
It is, and it's almost it's not the same as what everybody's like. It's unfair to. I thought that everyone expected so much out of Keegan so quick too because of the position he was in, and I think it's almost the same thing with Carter, where it's like because of the position we're in, everybody's like clamoring for Carter to be this almost savior, and it's like, how many rookies really come in that and really make. Even like Connect was hot on fire at first, and he's simmered down completely. Like, it's the ebbs and flows of the rookie season. Like, they figure you out. You have a couple good games. They figure you out. You have to adjust. It's all that. Like, the NBA life is different. 82 games is different. Like, all that. So,
it's tough.
It's tough.
And I mean, I've made this point a couple of times, but like when you're looking, I like Dalton Connect at number 12. Is it 12 or 13? Wherever they were drafting. Like I like Dalton Connect there as well. And then you had McCain, and you had some other kids that like not all of them made sense. And specifically like McCain, McCain had tore it up and now he's hurt. And again, a local kid and all that stuff. But like he didn't make any sense when your starting shooting guard was Keon Ellis or Kevin Huerter and your number one bench guy is Malik Monk. Now McCain makes a lot more sense because things change, Like if you had McCain right now and more of an offensive threat that can come in and create for himself, you'd feel a lot more confident with the bench unit than you do today. And that's just the life of the NBA. Nothing stays the same. It doesn't matter how many times you run it back with the same team. It looks different. The offensive ratings are different. The defensive ratings are different. Guys shoot different percentages from three, and everything's different every year. So, I definitely, I'm not sold that Devin Carter is going to change anything. But I also, again, he might make the Kings a little bit better. Like, he might improve their depth. We just have to wait and see what he looks like when he gets in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, he's not 6'10" and doesn't have a 7-foot wingspan, and
Doesn't block shots.
doesn't block shots.
Yeah. Was Zach Edey even an option? I'm just curious. Like, I know everybody either loves him or thinks he's going to be a G League player for the rest of his career. But when you looked at Zach Edey, did you ever see him as a possibility to be somebody to put next to somebody like Sabonis?
No. And I'll be honest, like, I watched him in the national championship game, and I thought in the national championship game, it wasn't horrible, but you saw him up against another gigantic person like Klingon, and his inability to play in the pick and roll was startling. Like, on the defensive side, his inability to defend on the perimeter at all, but then get back. Like, I was watching, and then if you watch Klingon play, you realize how slow Klingon is, and you're like, oh no, like, I'm not sure how that's going to work out, because, like, he wasn't a monster against Edey, but Edey also, it's about footwork. It's about, I always talk about the swivel in the hips and the ability to move and cover space and all that stuff. It's just not there. And maybe he gets better, but it's really difficult for, like, a 7'5" guy to just, like, become, like, more athletic. And, he is going to be more athletic because he's working with an NBA training staff, but we're talking about degrees of improvement, and I'm not sure how it translates. So I don't believe that he's, like, I think he'll be in the league forever. I mean, George Mirasan was in the league forever, and Boban was in the league forever too. I'm always confused why Taco Fall, couldn't stick in the league. But I mean, Taco Fall is the biggest human being I've ever seen. Well, I think. Yeah, probably. I mean, Sim Bular was taller, but Taco Fall is, like, massive. Like, his shoulders are 3 feet wide. Like, at least. He's just, like, a huge human being, and couldn't make it in the league. So that's where I always come back to, like, if he can't make it in the league, what make you think that Zach Edey can make it in the league? And maybe he can. Maybe he's I think that they've been okay when he's on the floor, but that's a tough one. And he went number 9. Like,
yeah, that's true. That's I forgot he went that early. That's true.
Yeah, it's almost like we talk about Franz Wagner. Oh, how great Franz Wagner would have looked in a Kings jersey. Yeah, he went the pick before. Like, there's nothing you can do about it when he goes to pick before.
Still would look good.
Like, the Yao Ming effect is human beings aren't really at 7 foot whatever. Their bodies aren't meant to do so much cutting back and forth on a 96-foot floor where the injuries are going to come to that foot. Those feet are not going to stay healthy for long periods of time. Like, it just never does seem to work out in that way.
There are guys that have been big, like even like Zydrunas Ilgauskas. I thought, he had foot problems as a young player, but then was able to figure it out. But again, he wasn't broad like Edey. Edey is like a gigantic human being. I mean, again, he's like Yao Ming big. And I know people have seen, if you ever want a crazy like comparison with Yao Ming, just look up Yao Ming and Shaq, and there's pictures of them standing side by side, and you realize how big Yao Ming is. Because for everybody in the NBA, you look at Shaq as like the biggest person you've ever seen, and then you look at him compared to like Yao, and he looks. And I say the same thing about, like, I watched Domantas Sabonis and his dad walk down the hallway, and like it looks like a dude with his kid. That's what it looks like. I mean, like Arvydas is so much bigger than Domas, like a true like 7'2", 7'3", and not only that, but probably outweighs him by like 60 pounds. Just a gigantic human being.
Yeah, it's like Stephen Brown next to John Pose. It's you know.
Oh no!
That's what it is, man.
Oh no!
Shout out Stephen Brown. Sorry, man.
Shout out Stephen Brown.
Yeah,
Catch
That's
us
hilarious.
right every Wednesday night.
Yeah. Sweet.
uh,
Awesome. What else you guys got for me?
anybody got questions out there? I was going to ask you your favorite hip hop duo, but I know we didn't prepare you for that. So,
I mean,
who's
yeah.
your favorite group of all time? And for what you love to listen to, who's your favorite group?
My favorite rock group, or
Yeah.
or favorite just like in general.
It could be in general, like
I'm-
favorite group in general is fine.
Like I grew up watching. I mean, listening to a ton of Beatles. Huge U2 fan. I don't know. Journey's big.
Journey is a good one.
Yeah, I'm a classic rock guy. Like I've seen, like Sean Cunningham has seen everybody in concert. I've seen every like older band that you could imagine in concert. And I've seen like Timberlake and like I don't know. I've been to a lot of concerts. But yeah, that would probably be really high on my list. Like those three, I would say. Zabo, I'm not a huge Chicago fan. I like Chicago, but there are bands that I like better. I did see
Jefferson
Chicago in
Starship?
concert. No, I saw Boston concert. No, not Jefferson Starship. I'm more of like big vocals, like a big Queen
Okay.
fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ham, you probably can't answer something like this, but obviously we're all tuning in because we love listening to you and Kyle on the radio. We're all big fans and stuff like that. Do you guys ever foresee adding that extra hour or possibly expanding the show? And I know it's not a simple question because that's all above your pay grade, Odyssey type stuff. But I mean, you guys definitely could carry a longer show. You guys are doing a great job, and I just always kind of wondered that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like I've always said no to like a 4-hour show because I've been pretty clear that I have back problems that I can't sit in a chair for 4 hours. Not it doesn't even matter if I get up and walk around for a little bit. That's not going to do it. I've got like really, really bad disc issues. So like I've always said no to like the idea of 4 hours. But I do think that there's a way that Kyle and I could do something like 9 to noon. And I don't know when that will happen or if it will happen for sure. But I definitely think that like we've had plenty of discussions about it and just what that would look like and all that. But you have to remember that like Kyle and I are like we're a 2-man band. And in order to go to a 3rd hour, you need a producer, you need all that stuff. And so we're talking about other elements that have to be added and other pay structures and other things that have to happen in order for it to all go down. I wouldn't say that like it's imminent, but I definitely think like we've had like recent discussions and there's hope. There's hope that we'll go to 3 hours and we certainly would like to do more. But I also know that leaving a game at 11 o'clock at night, getting home at midnight, and then getting up the next morning and having to drive back down to the studio for a 9 a.m. show that I've got to be there probably by 8 in order to prep and everything isn't going to be the easiest thing to do. So there's always like a give and take of it.
Well, man, we're all big fans, man. So
I just don't understand why KC doesn't send his driver for you. Like that would just be easier. You could nap in the back.
Yeah.
And nap on the way back home. Like this seems easy to me, but he's greedy. He's an LB being greedy, killing squirrels. So
and
whatever,
David,
man.
James has like 4 of the jobs besides the radio thing. He can't be doing everything, man.
Yeah, but again, I just mentioned selfish. So it's Ham, think about me. I enjoy listening to you guys at work. So you do this for me.
That's
do this
true.
For me.
That's true.
It's funny, like the I was surprised how much it's bitten into what I do on the Kings beat. Like how difficult it is for me and Sean and Brennan to all be in line for an hour and a half, 2 hours to do a podcast, all that stuff. It's not easy. All of our lives are moving all the time. And we're all centered around the Kings, but also centered around a wife that I've been married to for 25 years and a 21-year-old and a 17-year-old and trying to manage life in general. And so, yeah, I would love to do it. And Devin in the chat says, would I be willing to move? I would not be willing to move. There's a secret that people don't tell you. Sports writers make horrific pay. And I already told you where my wife went to school and what she does for a living. Like that's, like what I do is amazing and fun and I love it. And the second that I don't love it anymore, I won't do it anymore. Because it is like it's all consuming. But I also like I can do any of this without like an amazing partner.
So what
At
you're
all.
saying, Ham, is you're a trophy husband.
Something
Yes.
like that. Something like that.
Ham
Join
hit
the
the
club,
jackpot.
Ham. Join the club with me. It's okay.
It's
No,
okay.
You definitely hit the jackpot, sir. You
That
definitely hit the
A
jackpot.
comic creator does not make any money, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a cereal content eater, I make nothing for eating cereal. So
That's that must be a tough gig, just talking about cereal all day. So I don't know.
diabetes are kicking in, James. Let me tell
The
you.
diabetes, you're gonna get the diabetes.
No, oh no.
You wait every year so you can hear Clark W. Griswold talk about his the spray that he puts on cornflakes so
That's right.
they don't get absorbed by milk. Right.
That's right. I
Yeah.
need that spray.
That's right.
I need that
Yeah.
spray.
So I gotta ask. I know you're really, really into movies. What
Uh-huh.
are the top 3 movies you've seen this year?
Oh
question.
man, this year. Okay, so we traveled a lot this summer, and so I haven't. Oh man.
Okay, last couple years.
Okay, so here's the cool thing. My 21-year-old, he's transferring to Davis in the fall, but he just took a film course at Sierra. It's his last semester, and he was like, oh, I lined him up with some fun classes for his last semester. And we had a really, really good time watching sort of the entire world of film. So going back and watching Citizen Kane, going back and watching Charlie Chaplin films and like black and white, and then, having him watch Hitchcock films, The Birds and, Rear Window and all that stuff. I had a really good time like getting back into movies because the one thing, like if you listen to the King's Speed podcast, me and Sean, we making fun of Brendan all the time because he doesn't know, he has no pop culture references at all. Well, music he knows, but anything when it comes to like film, he doesn't know. Even TV, he doesn't really know. And it's funny because his dad is also a big movie buff, but Sean and I both worked at video stores. So we're old school dudes who worked at video stores, and that's where our love of movies come from. So I don't know. Sean has watched a lot more recent stuff, and he keeps telling me to watch some specific thing, but I consume like an insane amount of content. And I know we joke about it, but like I literally watch Netflix while I drive every day, all day. I know that sounds ridiculous and crazy and very dangerous, but I'm one of the Tesla boys at ESPN 1320. We're a family, but I auto drive with a pop socket with my hand like this.
Wow.
And I'm
Kids,
listening.
don't do this at home.
I'm listening.
Seriously.
I'm not really watching, but I'm listening. But I consume, I would say, like seasons of shows weekly and multiple seasons of different shows weekly. So I've seen just about everything you could possibly imagine on every single platform, including like BBC America stuff.
My girl does that. She is amazing at being able to watch everything under the sun without ever actually looking at the screen. And she can she listens to a lot of stuff too, like she consumes it, or she'll look up all the time too. But she's very good at she can watch a movie without actually watching a movie and break it down to you. And that's incredible to me.
I can watch a TV show or a movie on one TV, watch a game on another TV, and write at the same time.
Yes.
But what I can't do is I can't transcribe and do that. So even like if we're in studio and Kyle turns on music, or not music, I'm fine. If he turns on, like we'll listen to the show that's on before us and it's on up above, and then he starts talking, I have a tough time balancing the two voices in my head. But all the other stuff I'm fine with. Yeah.
We talked about it last week. What's your favorite Christmas movie?
Probably Christmas Vacation, Elf, Christmas Story.
Scrooged?
Yeah, I Scrooged is amazing. What my boys love, Harvey Weimer, which is like a very strange one, but it's spectacular. Kyle made me watch that stupid ass Lindsay Lohan movie. It's just like a bunch of shitbirds. Like everybody is not. They're all bad people. Like the whole time you're like, there is no one who's a good person here. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this. I don't know. Like, yeah. Outside of that, I think that I hit the basics. But we do watch a lot of Christmas movies. We watch a lot of Halloween movies.
Nice.
So we're big Christmas people. And
then you
big Halloween
combine
people.
them. So you combine them, and then you watch Silent Night, Deadly Night, and you can get Murder and Santa Claus all in one.
Well, that's why John Bull and I we share our affinity for the giant Nightmare Before Christmas characters, and so we put them up for Halloween, but then leave them up through Christmas, and it's partially because I think both of us are a little bit lazy, but also that we can just like throw a Santa hat on Jack, and he's 13 foot tall, and it's still Christmas, so we leave them up all the way through. And then this year, we did permanent Christmas lights. That was the coolest thing.
That's
so our house is all lit up. I didn't have to go
awesome.
climb on a ladder.
That's awesome.
There you go.
Cool.
Well, I think we kept enough of your time. We know you are on a busy schedule. You stayed with us for an hour and 40 minutes. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, I typically talk too much.
No,
not at all.
We could have kept going, but But I also want to, before we go, I want to wish for David, his cousin Faith, right?
Yep.
She is in a boxing national championships this week.
Yeah, she's actually fighting tomorrow at 9:00, and she's 14 years old. She's ranked #1 in the nation. We'll see how she does. It's boxing, so anything could happen. But man, she's an impressive young lady, man. And like I said, she's fighting for the national championship this weekend in Richmond, Virginia.
Nice. So let's all root for her. Hopefully it's good. Let us know what happens. We're rooting for her. So I think that's all we got for tonight, man. We're off next week. It's Christmas. Me and Katrina talked about. I think we're still going to do New Year's Day if everybody's good with that.
Slackers.
That's not. I know. I would be drunk on
for your time, James. Really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Hopefully, I didn't talk too much, and it's always good hanging out. And again, I hope that what you get from me is that like I'm pretty authentic and like pretty open about most things, and so that's just kind of who I am. So hopefully that resonates with you guys.
That's why we love you, man. That's why we love you. So have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yep, see you tomorrow.
Yeah, I got a show in like 10 hours. Thanks, guys. All right. See you guys.
All right. Yes. All right. Everybody else, I hope everybody has a great Christmas. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Light the beam. Let's keep this going, man. We need to get back on track again, right? So peace.
Chatty House. We ballin', boy. We going up at the Chatty House. We talk about it all, bring the family out. Sub to the channel, hit the likes now. And we only going up when the lights down. Yeah, we just getting started. Ain't no party like a Chatty House party. We just getting started. Ain't no party like a Chatty House party.